Before we get into today's show, I want to give a big shout out to Kat Caldwell for supporting the show on Patreon. Kat, your support is so appreciated and I can't wait to deliver better content to help you. Right, let's get on with things. So today I am talking to Andrea Fink, who lives north of Seattle, Washington in the US with her husband and daughter. Throughout her years of teaching elementary school, she has encouraged her students to follow their dreams, but now she is tackling her own dreams and finally writing the series she's been sitting on for a decade. Her first young adult fiction book, Mask, was published in August 2020, and the sequel, Wave, is expected in early 2021. So let's get on and find out what Andrea has to teach us about writing in a pandemic and how important it is to be able to pivot. Let's get listening. Welcome to the Turning Readers into Writers podcast, where we teach beginner writers how to find the time and the confidence to write their first novel. I'm your host, Emma Desi, and I'm very excited that you're here. Thank you for joining me today, because if you've been longing to write your novel for forever, then this is the place to be. Think of this as your weekly dose of encouragement, of hand-holding and general cheerleading as you figure out how you're going to write your first novel. Trust me, as a mum of 3 young kids, I know how tricky it can be to tuck some time aside for yourself on a regular basis. And even when you do find that spare 5 minutes, you can feel so overwhelmed that no writing gets done. Trust me, I have been there, but this podcast is going to help you in practical ways, because once a week I'll be delivering an episode that gives you steps to building a writing routine, encouragement to build your confidence, and cheerleading until you reach the end. Okay, let's start. Well, welcome, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really thrilled to have you on the show. So good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Well, I wonder if you could just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started writing.
So I am a second grade teacher up in near Seattle, Washington. I loved writing when I was a kid, and I kind of just gave up on it because I didn't think I was creative enough. I didn't think I was passionate enough. So about middle school, it's when everyone else in the class started showing how creative they were. And I'm like, well, I'm not up to that task. And then I just stuck with the sciences. I love sciences, so you'll see lots of that in my writing, but didn't feel creative enough. And when I hit like 2 years ago, I had a student who she wants to be a teacher when she grows up. She was so excited, and she like straight up asked me, thinking there couldn't be another answer in the world, "Oh, Mrs. Fink, you always wanted to be a teacher, didn't you?" And I was like, do I tell her the truth? And so I tell her a version of the truth. And I said, well, when I was in second grade, I wanted to be a writer. And all the kids got like really excited about that answer for some reason. And they were like, oh, that must be why you loved reading to the class, or why you love talking about books that you've read, and why you love this and that. And I'm like, yeah, it probably is. And so the next summer, I started writing a story that I'd been thinking of since high school, and it just started flowing, and it felt really good. And I'm like, I want to do this. So I committed to finishing that story, and I just wanted that to be done. Whether I liked it or not, I wanted to finish it. Yeah. And when that was done, I published it, and I'm in the editing phase of the second book, and I just love it so much.
Wow, well done you. So you really kind of just ran with it then. You took the idea, and I love the fact that it was your students as well who sort of really inspired you to think, yeah, why not? Why don't I just try and do this? Maybe that is why I loved reading out the stories. So you mentioned in your bio that the first story that you worked on, Mask, you'd actually been sort of describe it as you've been sitting on it for a decade. So could you tell us what that kind of meant for you? Did that mean that was something you had in the back of your head, or is it something you'd scribbled notes down about even, or was it just a kind of vague idea of something?
It was all in my head. I'm a big what-ifer, so I'm constantly like in my mind thinking, oh, well, what if this, what if that? Sometimes they're like real scenarios, like, I don't know, worst case scenarios that might happen. It's my anxiety always on. And then sometimes it's just complete fantasy. And so I had this idea of a story about two girls, and one needed to kill the other one. They were twin sisters. One needed to kill the other one. And then it just kept morphing. It's like, okay, well, she's never seen the color green and she needs to escape to this side of their kingdom and all these other things. And then I wanted to know how they got there. So in my mind, I started backtracking, like what happened before that? What happened before that? How did this world get created? And so eventually my original idea is now slotted as the third book. And I just go back a few generations. So really the first idea, like in high school, I was thinking of, I guess, the third book. And I have little snippets of where I was like, maybe I should start writing this. And I find them on like floppy disks and little thumb drives from a long time ago. But now I can look back at those and be like, wow, I really wasn't a very great writer back in middle and high school. But then I look at it and I see pieces of what I'm using now back then. So I've had this idea for a really long time, and it's just been morphing the past 10 years.
So that's really interesting. So did you feel that then, because you've been having this idea in your head for so long, because I'm guessing got to know the characters so well over those 10 years, did you find the actual writing of the first in the series quite easy because it was all there? It was just a question of putting it down on paper.
I knew the destination. That was like the really good part. I knew the destination. I kind of knew how I was getting there. I didn't really plot out every single detail for each book. And I also kind of stole from other books while I was writing the first one because it was my first book and I had very limited ideas on what I was going to do with it. And I'm like, oh, well, this would go really good here. So the entire progression has morphed over time. But it did come pretty easily. I knew about it. I've been excited about it for a long time. So I was motivated to sit down and write because I really wanted to tell this story. Because I remember like going to my sister and saying, oh my gosh, I have this really good story idea. And then just rambling. She's like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah, sure. But then you actually get it down on paper and she can read it and know what I mean. So I wanted to tell this story really badly at this point. Mm-hmm. And it was received well, which is great.
Now you write it's YA fantasy. Is that the right genre? So yeah. I'm interested. I don't read in fantasy or kind of sci-fi or any of the kind of otherworldly genres. So I'm always fascinated by how people world build. From someone who, I write very much in the domestic sphere, so it's all very familiar to me. How did you start world building for your stories? Did you have a kind of a process for it, or did it come willy-nilly, as we say in the UK?
It's the what I think. It's it was that original idea, and then building. How would that come to be? And any idea I would have, it was a lot of inspiration from what I saw. And this idea had been living in the back of my head. It camped out back there. It has its own room with its own butler just sitting back there. And so just anything I would see and think, wow, that would really incorporate well. You take a trip somewhere and you're like, oh, that building is so cool. What if like the palace would look something like that? Or you see this mountain range and you think, oh my gosh, it's so mysterious and it's so like overwhelming that this has to be part of this landscape. And I live in a place where I do get a lot of inspiration from nature. The Northwest has a mountain range on one side and water on the other side. And we have long nights in winters and we have long days in summers. So the world is built around these 4 regions. The seas, the mountains, the light region, and the dark region. So I get a lot of inspiration from where I am here. And then travel and you see other things. When I was writing the first book, my mom blessed us with a trip to Iceland. And just, I don't know if you've ever been, but it is amazing. Just the sheer beauty of nature out there, and just being able to pick up, like, you drive by this little rock formation along the water and you think, oh my gosh, that is perfect. I love this. I want to take that. So I'm just kind of stealing from everywhere all the things that I like, because I wanted this world to be something that I liked.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted it to be something that at least I would enjoy, because I didn't know if anyone else would enjoy it. So I wanted to make it for myself and then see if other people responded.
And did you, just kind of on a practical note, did you, I hear that, a common thing to do is keep a world building Bible, I think they call it. So did you do something like that, where you have a file where it just kind of helped you keep track of the different landscapes and the different names of places, and the types of beings that are maybe in your world?
I do not. So I probably should, because while writing the second book, there has been a lot of Control F in my first document, trying to find certain things, like, what color was that? I need a little bit more detail on that so I can describe it again in a different way. But no, I don't have a world building Bible. It has been so ingrained in my head at this point that I could tell you almost anything about my world just off the top of my head. But yes, I probably should make my world building Bible pretty soon. So at least I can stay consistent once I get to like the 4th or 5th books.
So do you have plans for that? Do you want the series to extend as long as that?
I have solid plans for the first 3, and then a series of short stories about the world. And then I have a spin-off series, but I also have ideas for other things I could do in this world. So I'm deciding where I want to go after that. But I should probably finish the second book first.
It's got lots of ideas. That's great. Now, I know you mentioned just before that you are an elementary teacher, and I think you also have a toddler. Is that right?
I do, yep.
So you've got a lot going on in life with working. I know toddlers well. They are a handful. So how do you manage to balance everything so that you get enough time for your children, enough time for your husband, for work, friends, and then also leave room for the passion in your life, for your writing?
So when I decided to start writing, I talked with my husband, and he agreed that it would be a good idea for me to follow this and to do this. And so I actually went part-time at my job. I found a wonderful co-teacher, and I got to do mornings teaching and then afternoons writing before I picked up my daughter from daycare. And it was a really great plan. It worked out really well. Just like all great plans that started in 2019, they kind of ended in 2020. So a good chunk of the writing got done during those afternoon slots, but I didn't have as good a routine as I should have. I had this great opportunity and I wasn't taking as much advantage of it as I should. I ended up doing laundry and making dinner and all those things that you do when your toddler's out of the house. So when quarantine hit is kind of where I made that routine, because I needed to make a routine if I was going to be stuck at home all day. And so nap time and bedtime became really important for writing. The moment my daughter went down for a nap, even if she wasn't asleep yet, even if she was still crying, my Chromebook would open and I would go straight to the document, because I knew I didn't have a lot of time. And that kind of time crunch and having that in my schedule every day, I knew I was going to write at that time. Mm-hmm. I knew that I wouldn't have much time to write. So I got really good at just fitting it all in there. And then after bedtime, my husband and I would watch 1 or 2 episodes of something, and then he'd get to go play video games downstairs, which he loved doing. So he was okay with this. And I would just sit and write as long as I could. Sometimes it was till 9 o'clock, and then I'd burn out. And then sometimes it was like a midnight 1 a.m. writing session, because inspiration finally struck me. And it happened to strike me at 11 o'clock at night.
Typical. I think that's great, though. I think that really emphasizes the importance of being adaptable and flexible. I think a lot of writers, and maybe I'm being unfair, but I think particularly when you first start out, there's an idea that you've got to be in a certain place, you've got to have a desk, everything's either got to be quiet or you've got to have the right ambient music, and you've got to have 2 hours free. When in actual fact, I think in this day and age and how busy we all are, you actually have to be adaptable. And something like a pandemic, can just kick you off course. And so, okay, I've got to find a plan B here and make it work for me. So I think that's a really kind of useful message for anybody listening, if they're feeling that they just don't have the time. It often comes down to you making that time for yourself for something that you love doing so much. So I'm really glad that you shared that with us. And so when you did find those, refigure your schedule, and you had those 2 writing slots, what was your aim for those slots? Was it just to fill that time in some way, or did you have a word count that you wanted, or perhaps a scene or a chapter that you wanted to write at each session?
There were some months that I chose as word count months. And those were the months where I had to do a certain number of words in a certain session. But if I found that if I did that constantly, again, I would burn out really quickly, and I just couldn't, it wasn't sustainable for me. Okay. So there were some months that I chose as, okay, I'm getting words on paper. That's my goal. And then there's other months where I just, okay, whatever I can get out, I'll get out. And one of the big things for those word count months was that I did not have to work on the section I was working on. If it wasn't coming to me, what I was working on right then, I would jump to a future scene that I had daydreamed in the shower the day before, or something that I really had solidly down and was excited about, because I wanted my writing to sound like I was excited about it. I wanted to convey how excited I was about the story. And if there was a section I was like, I'm not excited about this right now, I would put it on the back burner and work on something else, because I did have that limited time, and I wanted to work on stuff that I was excited about during that time, because it was time for me. As a mom, you don't get a lot of time outside of nap time and bedtime for stuff for you. Uh-huh. So as long as it was my time and I was doing it for me, I was excited about it, then it was of value to me. And I wanted to make sure that my time was still of value.
Yeah, I think that's worth remembering, isn't it? We get caught up in the craft of it and in the word counts and having to get this project finished, and then we want to get it published, that it can be easy to forget that this is a passion project in the beginning, and it is something that we enjoy doing. And it can be easy to let the fun and the curiosity slip away and be functional about it. So it's nice that you recognize that in yourself and said, okay, no, I can vary my writing, what I need to write, because it's fun. I want to enjoy it, and I've got to remember that. It took me a long time to get to that point, to remember that point. And it was Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic, that really kind of pointed that out to me, that this is a lifelong journey. So it's really important to enjoy it. Otherwise, as you say, you'll get that burnout, and then that's no good to anybody. So you've written the first draft to the sequel of Mads, and the sequel is called Wave. And so congratulations on finishing your first draft. That must feel really good.
It does.
And you've mentioned that, so the next step for you now is to find your beta readers. And so do you already have some beta readers lined up from when you released Mask, or are you starting the search again? And how did you find your beta readers?
So my beta readers, because during the first one, it was just a little passion project. I had my sister and 2 really good friends who lived together, and then a former coworker who is very into the fantasy genre. So those are kind of like my really solid. My sister acts as my cheerleader, because she never has any criticism, but she always likes to point out what she likes. So that's really good for me, because I need a little bit of positive encouragement as I'm going on. Mm-hmm. I think everyone does, because I don't have much for myself. So getting that from external sources is very useful. And then my 2 friends, Jackie and Julie, they get to read it and then talk about it together, which is really great, because they're like their own little book club, because they live together. Hey. So that's really
without you there.
Yes, without me there, exactly. And then they just type their feedback on the document, and one will be like, oh, I totally agree with that. You definitely need to tell us more about this, or this doesn't make sense for this character. And then Raven, who is my 4th, she's very into the craft. She really likes to point out, well, the way this is worded, or you never described this earlier. You should probably do this earlier so people have the image in their mind. So I have this wonderful collection of people from different parts of my life, all filling these different roles in beta reading. So that not a lot of people have that many people who are willing to read a first draft of something that they're writing. But I mean, I hadn't talked to Raven in person in probably 5 years or so, but she was still willing to do this for me. So
did you do a shout out, say on social media or something, to say, would anybody be willing to read this for me? Or did you know that she was an avid reader and you reached out to her?
I knew she was an avid reader. I knew she's one of those really creative people who always made me feel bad about not being very creative, because she's very artsy and she makes all these crafts and she's a really good writer and she has all these great skills. So I just knew I wanted to reach out to her. She also, so where we used to work, closed for the pandemic. So I was like, well, she might have time on her hands. So I also offered her compensation because I knew that I didn't want to waste the time that she now had, because I mean, time is still valuable even if you're not working, and I wanted to make sure that she got something in return for it.
Yeah, well, and I think also then it sort of professionalizes the relationship a little bit. She won't feel so bad about if she does have some constructive criticism for the book, and you know that it's coming from a good place and that she's taking her role seriously as a reader. So that's really great. And I love the fact that, you've got your cheerleader there and your sister who is not going to point out the bad stuff, but will point out the good stuff. And then you've got your little mini book club there who act just as a normal reader might, who is in a book club. And then the friend who's able to offer that more kind of craft constructive criticism. That's a really nice mix to have. And you're right. I don't think many of us do have that nice a bunch of mixed readers. Yeah. So I was looking at your Facebook page, and I'll link to that in the show notes as well, so people can go and check you out. But I was really interested in the AMA that you organised for the launch of Mask, which was your Ask Me Anything session that you did, the launch. So why did you decide to do that, and how did you go about organising it? And did it work out? Did it do what you wanted it to do?
So AMAs, I'm on Reddit all the time, so I'm very familiar with AMAs. So I wanted to do that because I couldn't have a book launch party. My cousin is an author, and I've seen her have all these book launch parties, and I'm like, oh, they're so cute, and she has like so many people, and she ends up with like 20 people leaving her house with their book in their hands. I'm like, oh, that's so great. I want to do that. And then you can't have parties anymore. So I decided to do an AMA because a lot of people in my life, I was kind of keeping this pretty secret for a while. I didn't want a lot of people knowing in case I failed, that constant struggle of, oh, this is just going to be terrible and it's going to be a one-time thing. And so I kind of wanted it as like almost my coming out as an author party. And I didn't get the full party. So I wanted a way for people to ask questions about this separate aspect of my life that I hadn't really revealed to a lot of people. And so family could come in and ask questions about writing or about what I've been doing for the past year and a half. And then people who have been interested in the book can come ask about the book. And it's kind of this great mesh of questions that I got from people I knew from my life in science, and people I knew from family, and people I just met on Instagram. So it was a really great conglomeration, and people were able to send in questions early in case they weren't able to be there, and then they were able to watch the video later. And then if people popped in that moment, I would be able to respond in time. So it was pretty great. I had almost like a full hour of questions, which was really great. Also really hard on my voice, and also hard on my cheeks because I was on video the whole time. So I felt like I needed to smile. And I was also excited. So I was genuinely smiling as well. And then, of course, in the back of my mind, I had my mom's voice going, don't look out the window. Because that's what I do when I'm thinking. And you can see half of the video is me looking up out into the windows.
And were the questions you got, were they Were they good questions? Did it make you think about things about your story in a different way? Did it inform the second book even?
I already had the plan for the second book, but they were pretty good questions just to kind of get myself a better identity as an author, because I had not, again, I have an Instagram that's separate from my family Instagram for my author stuff. It's like, I don't want to hound my family with my writing. I want to have a separate community for that, everything separate. But getting these questions from my family about being an author and kind of my inspiration and stuff like that got me thinking about my thinking, a little bit of metacognition. A little bit of metacognition about my process and everything like that. And I never really thought about it before. So it was really useful to start thinking about myself as an author. It was a to do it because it was my publishing day. So perfect timing. Finally an author on the day I literally become a self-published author.
And would you do it again? I mean, it sounds like it was a big success. Now that everyone knows you're a writer and you've released that first book, did it feel that it was a really good way of just getting the word out about your new release? Would you do it again, do you think?
I would probably do it again, yes. Probably not an entire hour, probably a shorter AMA session. But I would do it again. Mm-hmm. And especially now that I have more people following me on Instagram and Facebook, it would probably reach a larger audience. And I know that a lot of other writers are following me. So especially a lot of independent authors. So being able to share that with them, and then they would have their own versions of the questions that were being asked, kind of like you have these questions for new authors. It's going to come from a different perspective and make me think about a different aspect of my author life.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. I've never thought about doing it. I think I'm going to lodge that idea for myself for my next release. Now, you mentioned kind of inspiration just before, and I wondered which writers, which authors have inspired you, and also kind of perhaps which craft books have been good inspiration for you as well. But maybe we could start with your favorite authors. Who's inspired you?
I am actually, if you read the book, you might see it that I'm a huge history buff. So I don't read too much fantasy. Like I will read some of the major series. I'll read a lot of YA series. I like reading what's popular. I know it's probably a bad thing to say. I like reading what's popular. I love going with the flow. I love knowing what everyone else knows. But I'm not a huge fan of her as a person, but as an author, J.K. Rowling is like held to a very, she's kind of up there for me, because in my generation that grew up with Harry Potter and grew up with the Wizarding World, you can ask anyone who is my age, what is your Harry Potter house? What's your Hogwarts house? They'll have an answer for you, or they'll know what you're talking about. I don't think there's any other thing on the planet Earth where you can ask an entire generation of people something and they'll know what you're talking about, except for maybe what's the weather today. So just how ingrained in the culture her world has become is really fun for me, because people mentally live there. Some people are just like there all the time. They identify themselves. I identify myself as a Slytherin. And it's just like, and people know what that means. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So having that ability to have your world be so well known, that's kind of like, I would love if the four regions became like the Hogwarts houses and everyone would have their own. I know it's like,
you never know.
Way out there.
And what about craft-wise? Which sort of teachers or mentors have you kind of read or reached out to get inspiration for your writing life?
So I've never read a craft book, but I do follow a lot of self-published authors on Instagram, and just following their process and watching what they do, because the community there is really good. It has so many self-published authors who are more than happy to help others. And so I've actually direct messaged some of them, and they're willing to give me feedback or what to expect. I had one who I didn't know when my proof copy was going to come in before the release date, and I was panicking. And so I just messaged her, and she's like, "Oh, well, mine came in this many days and I had to ship all the way to Hawaii. So don't worry too much about it. You might need to push back your launch, but just wait and see when it ships." And so like just getting someone who knew what was going on and knew the steps in the publishing process and who knew the struggles in writing. And when I can post something about, well, I got this many words done and there's still someone there to congratulate you. It's really nice. So having that community, I think, is probably better than any craft book I can find and manage to read in my limited time.
Well, that's great. No, it's lovely. I think community is so important, and it's not always easy to find, I think, particularly in person, to find a good writing community that is supportive and encouraging of one another. And so, yeah, that next best thing, I think, is, you're right, is that online community where friendships are made that would never otherwise have met, but across the internet we can do that. We can forge those connections. So I wondered if you could, I'm just conscious of time actually, where we've been chatting away, but I wondered what advice you might have for anybody who is where you were kind of 18 months ago, just starting out, thinking about, okay, I'm going to do this, pushing past all the kind of imposter syndrome and feelings of doubt. What would your words of wisdom be for them now?
The first person you're going to need to impress is yourself. So write something that you want to read, because even if no one else ends up reading it, you've written something that you like. And don't try to, follow the rules, but don't try too hard to adhere to them if it doesn't feel right for you. If you want your story to be a certain way, you have every permission to do it. I am giving you permission to do it however you want to do it. Because it's your book. It is your book. You don't need to be writing 3,000 words a day. You don't need to do it the way that someone else tells you to do it. It is your book. You do it how you want to do it and write the story you want to read.
Excellent words. Excellent words there. I couldn't agree more. So, Andrea, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
So I am most active on Instagram. So it's Andrea as an author with a period in between all of them. I do post updates on Facebook under Andrea Fink author, but those are not as frequent. So if you really want to get in contact with me, if you want to see what I'm up to on a weekly basis, Instagram is going to be where you find me.
Excellent.
If you have questions about the book, I actually love getting those. So message me and I will give you secrets about book 2 if you've read book 1 and you want to know more.
Well, talking of your book, where can listeners find your book?
It is on Amazon. It is on all major booksellers online. It is on every Amazon that I'm allowed to send it to. So if you're in the Netherlands, I have it there. If you're in the UK, I have it there. If you're in India, I have it there. So I just wanted it to be as widely dispersed as possible. And if you want the ebook, it is only available on Kindle right now.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that's lovely, Andrea. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed chatting to you today.
I've had fun. Thank you. This is a lot less nerve-wracking than I thought it'd be. It's my first podcast interview. So,
congratulations.
Well, you made it very easy. So thank you.
No problem.
Before you go, I wanted to tell you about my Patreon page. Whenever anyone supports the show, it expresses just how much you're enjoying the content and how much you want it to continue. Your support helps maintain the podcast and keeps it going. It means I can create better resources for you when you're listening to the podcast or checking out the webpage. It means I can focus on getting a higher reach of audience. And when we get a higher reach of audience, we can get more guests. Guests that are really going to help you. And then who knows where it'll go from there. As a new podcaster and someone who's starting out and finding their feet in the podcasting world, just as I'm helping you find your feet in the writing world, I can't do it alone. I always need help, so I'd love it if you would support the show by signing up. There's just one tier, $3 a month, and for that I'll make sure that each week I'm delivering the best podcast I can for you. And as a way of saying thanks, I'll give you a personal shout out on the show. So check out the page at patreon.com/Emma Desi. That's patreon.com/Emma Desi. See you next time.